This is Anthony Martin recording a demo for audiobook narration. I'll be reading a selection of Irving Stone's The Agony and the Ecstacy, beginning on page 530. He returned to his scaffold determined that nothing should further divert him, neither troubles in Rome nor in Florence. His sketches for the vault were fairly complete now, and they called for 300 men, women, and children, all imbued with the potency of life, displacing space as three-dimensional as those who walk the earth. The force to create them must come from within himself. It would take days, weeks, months of demoniacal energy to imbue each individual character with an authentic anatomy, mind, spirit, and soul, and a radiation of strength so monumental and outpouring that few men on the earth below could match them for power. Each one had to be pushed out of his artistic womb. Pushed out by his own articulate, frenzied force. He must gather within himself his galvanic might. His burgeoning seed must be generated each day anew within his vitals, hurtled into space, projected onto the ceiling, giving life everlasting. Though he was creating God the Father, he himself was God the Mother, source of a noble breed, half man, half God, inseminated each night by his own creative fertility, carrying until the dawn, and then, on his lonely truckle bed high in the heavens, going through and on his own creative fertility, carrying on until the dawn, and then, in his lonely truckle bed high above the heavens, going through patrician to deliver a race of immortals. God Almighty creating the sun and the moon, the earth and the water, the plants, the cattle, the crawling things, man and woman, even he had been exhausted from this torrential creativity. God saw all that he had made, and found it very good, but on the seventh day he had come to the end of making and rested. Why then should he, Michelangelo Buonarroti, a small man, only 5'4", weighing 100 pounds, no heavier than one of Florence's society girls, laboring for months without adequate food and rest, why should he not be exhausted? When he prayed, "Dear God, help me," he was praying to himself, beseeching himself to have fortitude, to be invincible of body and spirit, to have the stamina and will to create mightily a vision of a more heroic world. For 30 days he painted from light to dark, completing the sacrifice of Noah, the 4 titanic male nudes surrounding it, the Eritrean Sibyl on her throne, and the prophet Isaiah in the pendentive opposite, returning home at night to enlarge the cartoon of the Garden of Eden. For 30 days he slept in his clothes without taking them off, even his boots, and when at the completion of the section, utterly spent, he had Michi pull his boots off for him, and the skin came away with them. He fed off himself. When he grew dizzy from standing and painting with his head and shoulders thrown back, his neck arched so that he could peer straight upward, his arms aching in every joint from the vertical effort, his eyes blurred from the dripping paint even though he had learned to paint through slits and blink them shut with each brushstroke, just as he did against the flying marble chips. He had Rosselli make him a higher platform, the 4th on top of the scaffolding. He painted sitting down, his thighs drawn up tight against his belly for balance, his eyes a few inches from the ceiling, until the unpadded bones of his buttocks became so bruised and sore that he could no longer endure the agony. Then he lay flat on his back, his knees in the air, doubled over as tightly as possible against his chest to steady his painting arm. Since he no longer bothered to shave, his beard became an excellent catch-all for the constant drip of paint and water. No matter which way he leaned, crouched, lay, or knelt, on his feet, knees, or back, it was always in strain. Then he thought he was going blind. A letter arrived from Buonarroti, and when he tried to read it, he could see nothing but a blur. He put the letter down, washed his face, ate a few forkfuls of the overcooked pasta that Misi had made for him, and went back to the letter, but he could not decipher a word. He threw himself on his bed, sorely beset. What was he doing to himself? He had refused to paint the simple commission the Pope had requested. He threw himself on his bed, sorely beset. What was he doing to himself? He had refused to paint the simple commission the Pope had requested, and now he would come out of this chapel a gnarled, twisted, ugly, blind dwarf, deformed and aged by his own colossal stupidity. What Torrigiani had done to his face, the vault would do to his body. He would carry its scars to his dying day. Why wouldn't he have let well enough alone? He would have made his peace with the Pope, been back in Florence long since, enjoying dinner in the company of the cauldron, sleeping in his comfortable house, carving the Hercules. Sleepless, racked with pain, and homesick, he rose in the inky blackness, lit a candle, and on the back of an old sketch tried to lighten his mood by pouring out his woes in verse. I've grown a goiter by dwelling in this den, as cats from stagnant streams in Lombardy, or in what other land they hap to be, which drives the belly close to the chin. My beard turns up to heaven, my nape falls in, fixed on my spine. My breastbone visibly grows like a harp, a rich embroidery bedews my face from brush drops thick and thin. My loins into my paunch like levers grind, my buttocks like a crupper bears my weight, and my feet unguided wander to and fro. Come then, try to succour my dead pictures my fame, since foul I fare, and painting is my shame. Word reached him that his brother Leonardo had died in a monastery in Pisa. There was no information as to why he had been moved to Pisa, or whether he had been buried there, or the nature of his illness. But as Michelangelo walked to San Lorenzo and Damaso to have Mass said for the repose of Leonardo's soul, he felt that he knew the answer. His brother had died of an excess of zeal. Might not that also be the cause of his own death? And scene.